due south of the meridian, amid the pristine landscape of northwestern Argentina, a child was born. A child who would play roles in the rise and fall of nations, become an international symbol of strength, justice, and revolution. The man, the legend, Che Guevara. Born in Rosario, Argentina, June 14, 1928, Che was the eldest of a family of 5 children. He was an athlete. Although he suffered from acute asthma, he excelled at things like soccer, swimming, and even golf. Rugby teammates nicknamed him Chancho, the pig, because he rarely bathed and wore a weekly shirt. In 1948, he entered the University of Buenos Aires to study medicine in the hopes of becoming a doctor. But in 1951, he decided to take a year off from his studies to go on a motorcycle journey across South America with his friend Alberto Granado. He came into close contact with poverty the further he went, which helped to influence his revolutionary ideas. He kept track of the events of this life-changing journey by taking notes, which was adapted into the 2004 film, The Motorcycle Diaries. After his return from his motorcycle trip, he completed his medical studies in 1953, making him an official doctor. December 10, 1953, before leaving for Guatemala, he wrote a letter to his aunt about passing through the dominions of the United Fruit Company, which convinced him of the evil of the capitalist octopuses. He decided to settle down in Guatemala so to perfect himself and accomplish whatever may be necessary in order to become a true revolutionary. In Guatemala City, Guevara established contact with some Cuban exiles who had links to Castro through the July 26 attack on the Moncada barracks in Santiago de Cuba. During this time, he earned his nickname Che, or Pal. On May 15, 1954, a shipment of infantry and light artillery was sent from communist Czechoslovakia to Guatemala, igniting a CIA-sponsored coup attempt, which succeeded, cementing Guevara's view of the United States as an imperial power. In September of 1954, Che arrived in Mexico City, where he met up with some Cuban exiles which he had befriended in Guatemala. In June of 1955, he was introduced to Fidel Castro, who was plotting to overthrow the dictatorship of Fulgencio Batista in Cuba, who he deemed a U.S. puppet whose strings needed cutting. Castro's plan was put into action on November 25th of 1956. They set out for Mexico on an old leaky cabin cruiser, the Granma. Most of their men were killed by Batista's military during the initial landing, although a small group of rebels survived and regrouped in the Sierra Maestra Mountains, although only 20 of the original 88 men survived. As the war continued, Che became an integral part of the rebel army. He set up factories to make grenades, built ovens, and even taught new recruits about military tactics. Years later, he would even be dubbed by Time magazine as Castro's brain. Guevara was the only other ranked commander of the rebel army besides Castro, and he was an extremely harsh disciplinarian. He sent execution squads after traitors and those planning to go AWOL. He came to be feared for his harsh punishments. Guevara helped to create the clandestine radio station in February 1958, which broadcasted news to Cuban citizens, and he also provided radio-telephone communication to link the rebels across the island. He played a very critical role in the Battle of Los Mercedes, using his column to halt a force of 1,500 soldiers who were attempting to encircle Castro's forces. In December of 1958, he would direct his Suicide Squad in the attack of Santa Clara, which was the last decisive military victory of the revolution. Sometimes his men were outgunned, outnumbered, and overrun. January 8, 1959, Castro's army rolls victoriously into Havana, and the revolutionary government proclaims Guevara as a Cuban citizen by birth. After the revolution, Castro followed a plan similar to the Allies' Nuremberg trials after World War II. He made Guevara commander of the La Cabana fortress prison. He was in charge of purging the Batista army and exacting revolutionary justice against traitors, informants, or war criminals. He did not participate in the 1961 Bay of Pigs invasion sponsored by the CIA. Instead, he was assigned to fend off a decoy force when his pistol accidentally discharged, grazing his cheek. Guevara used his relations with Soviet Russia to help bring nuclear-armed ballistics to Cuba, which began the Cuban Missile Crisis in October 1962. In 1965, Guevara ventured to Africa to offer his knowledge and experience in the ongoing conflict in the Congo. He believed Africa to be imperialism's weak link. Guevara and his second-in-command, Victor Drake, along with 12 other Cuban expeditionaries, entered the Congo April 24, 1965. 100 Afro-Cubans soon joined afterwards. The CIA, working with the Congo National Army, were able to thwart Guevara by listening to his radio transmissions via the USNS Private Jose F. Valdez, a floating listening post in the Indian Ocean. Guevara cited the incompetence and fighting amongst themselves as key reasons to the revolt's failure. In early 1967, Guevara was in the Nancahuazu Valley of Bolivia, training at his camp along with his guerrilla force of 50 men, the National Liberation Army of Bolivia. Although his well-equipped force scored some early successes, he expected to be dealing only with poorly equipped and ill-trained Bolivian military, and was unaware that the CIA had sent a team of Special Activities Division commandos to aid the anti-insurrection effort. And in the 11 months he had attempted recruitment in Bolivia, he failed to gain a single local inhabitant, probably on account of his confrontation over compromised actions. On October 7, 1967, an informant revealed the location of Guevara's camp to the Bolivian Special Forces, who encircled him, and he was wounded and taken prisoner. Guevara was taken to a mud schoolhouse and for a day and a half would not talk to Bolivian officers. Despite having his hands tied, Guevara kicked an officer when he tried to steal his pipe. On the morning of October 9th, Bolivian President René Barrientos ordered Guevara to be killed. His executioner was Mario Terán, a half-drunk sergeant in the Bolivian army. The highly romanticized image of Che as a rebel fighting for peace and justice is definitely not entirely accurate. He was not a pure-minded freedom fighter as so many make him out to be, and he committed his fair share of atrocities. He was an admirer of Stalin and Mao Zedong's methods and accomplishments, being a Marxist himself. Guevara said that hatred was something to be harnessed and used, not only as an element to struggle against injustice, but to be used to perpetrate new injustices. So really think about it next time you choose to don a Che Guevara t-shirt.